Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of our Focusing Pathways podcast. In this episode, Trey speaks to Rob Foxcroft. Although this conversation was recorded in November 2024, we are delighted to be sharing it with you now. Rob, as you will hear, had a very interesting arrival to focusing at a humanistic conference, and later when he received a copy of Eugene Jenlen's Dreams book, which ultimately led him to Chicago in 1988 to learn focusing with Jean, Mary McGuire, and B.B. Simon, who he developed a very special friendship with. He has rich memories of sitting with all of these wonderful teachers and receiving valuable wisdom. Rob shares about his work teaching music to children, his deep connection with them, and how easily they attune to each other. During the conversation, Rob also reflects on the achievements and the challenges involved in developing the worldwide focusing community, particularly after the death of Eugene Jenlen. Rob has written a wonderful book called Feeling Heard, Hearing Others, and speaks about the incredible healing power of listening for both people involved. So, as always, we invite you to take some time to listen to this enriching conversation between Therese and Rob.
Hello, Rob, and it's really lovely to have you here on Focusing Pathways. You're very welcome.
It's very nice of you to ask me, and I'm delighted to be here. Looking forward to what we might talk about.
Well, I'd love to start, as we usually do, by inviting you to share with us how focusing found you, to take us right back. I know you're focusing a very long time.
Okay, we can make this story very, very long, or I'll do my try to give you a medium-sized version. I suppose by 1980, I was beginning to think that life was not going to sort itself out without finding some helpful things. And the first helpful thing that came along was the Alexander technique. One of the dancers in Scottish ballet said to me, "What you need is the technique." So I went off and then after a while, it was clear to me there were things in the mind and the emotional life that the technique wasn't getting to. Though I'm still very committed to Alexander work. It's good. And then I was briefly in Australia, and I met a hugely distinguished hypnotist meditation teacher, which was the next step, but still not quite in the right place. And then I went to see a Kleinian analyst who was absolutely disastrous. And my life, after a little of his attention, my life completely came to bits in 1985 in a very painful way. And as I began to pick up the pieces, I went to a therapist who, by all the normal standards, was just atrocious. She was gossipy and she was opinionated, and yet in some ways she was wonderful. She had the gift of believing in people, and it made up for all the other things. And she also was not possessive, as many people working in close personal relations are, without perhaps always knowing it. She was always, go and try this and go and do that, and you might like the other. Totally not jealous. And she encouraged me to go to a summer school of the Association for Humanistic Psychology, which was very exciting because the Christian members were more or less at war with the pagan members. One of the pagan members took off all her clothes and rushed out and rolled in the dew, to the great shock of some of the Christians. And in the middle of all this, it was a very lively atmosphere that year. In the middle of this, there was a little workshop, as you get at conferences, about Rogers and Gendlin, the relevance of relating. Well, I knew I was into Carl Rogers. I got that far at this point. I had never heard of Jean Chamberlain. I didn't have any idea what the relevance of relating might be. But I went to this little workshop, at which we did one of these felt sense exercises where one person stands still and senses inwardly, and the other person slowly walks towards them. Well, the exercise did nothing for me. But there are only 4 people in this little group. Other people had gone to other things. And so the facilitator was one of the 4, and he did the exercise with me. And as I say, it did nothing. The other 2, it did only too much, because the man, it was a man and a woman. The man was very distressed or something. And in the afternoon at another conference workshop, he assaulted the woman he'd done this exercise with him. And they were both advised to leave the conference and go home because the organizers said they couldn't guarantee the safety of these people. And I thought, well, I don't know what we were doing, but there's clearly something very powerful at work here. And I did get to talk to them both before they left individually, and they both tried to explain what had gone on for them. So I had this very stormy arrival in focusing. And Vivian Mulroy, who was at that time the editor of Self and Society, gave me the new Jean Gendlin Dream book to review. No, he didn't. I'm mixing myself up. He gave me Neil Friedman's new book to review and a copy of Jean Gendlin's focusing book to read as background. And so the first thing I ever read about focusing was Neil's book, and then Jean's book, and then I sent for the Dream book. And it was really the Dream book. As soon as I read a few pages of the Dream book, I could see that I could do more for my dreams with this book than I could do with the nice therapist. So I changed her for a person-centered person who knew nothing about dreams, but was very good in many ways. And I got in touch with the Focusing Institute and got Mary Maguire, who was then the director. And Mary said, well, you need to come to Chicago and learn focusing. And I said, well, I'll come if I can have some time with you one-to-one and some time with Jean Gendlin one-to-one. And she said, call it done. I was able to do this because 2 people had died at the end of, this was 1987. My aunt had left me a little money, not very much, but enough to go and do a workshop in Chicago. And somebody very close to me had died. This was all part of the very painful stuff that happened in 1985, and that also produced a little money. So in March 88, there I was in Chicago, and Mary had had an intuition. Mary Maguire called up B.B. Simon and said, I think it would be good if you had this guy to stay in your house. I think it would work, and you would love to have him, and it would save him money. And BB said, I have never had a strange man to stay in my house ever, and I don't see why I should start now. And Mary said, just do it, okay? So BB said, right. But then she didn't want to meet me at her house. She wanted at least to check me out in the city center, I think. So she arranged to meet me in a doorway and in the Loop in downtown Chicago. And I came off my plane, and there in this doorway was this woman with red hair, as she had it then. And we met and we went home to her house, and Bibi was my friend and champion for many, many years. And a tremendously good friend to me, and was my first focusing teacher. And the same evening the workshop began, and there was the usual sort of introductory talk. But introductory talks go past me. I can't relate to that stuff. They might as well not have bothered. But then we sat down in threes, 1 trainer and 2 new people. And the other person went first, and then it was my turn. And in the 3.5 months since my friend died, I had felt nothing. I now know that this happens to me with bereavement. It was very worrying to me then. I had felt absolutely nothing. Only this concern that I was feeling nothing. Surely I should feel something. And it was a blank. And then I sat down with Bibi, and she said, as she always said, you don't have to tell me anything. You can tell me anything you like, but it's good if you have anything that comes for yourself first. And if you only want to tell me enough of the process so that I can know what kind of thing is going on, you don't need to share any of the content. And as she said that, I was completely overwhelmed with feeling.
Mm.
Just a huge, I suppose, catharsis. I would hesitate to call it a felt shift because it was much more like just an explosion of all the feeling that had been hiding behind this wall. And really, at that moment, Phoebe became my close friend and dear champion, and we remained very important to each other until she died at 99 years old last year.
Wow, wow. And that's so important, isn't it? When you say that, was it that the giving permission not to have to tell the story or not to have to explain any content? What was it?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things I didn't want to. This gets to very, very delicate places. There were things I didn't really want ever to talk to anybody about. And to some extent, things like meditation and Alexander technique, which are not about your content, were a good place to start. But then I'd been to the Kleinian, and I'd been to the person-centered therapist, and there's this assumption that it's better to say things than not to say them.
Mm.
Well, I knew when I was 8, I had a deeply traumatizing change and process in my life, which left me knowing things about my imaginative life that were very shocking to me and which I had absolutely no way to deal with. But the last thing I wanted to do was to talk about them to somebody. So yes, it was very extraordinary to me when Bibi said that. It was like, oh, and it did. And I certainly, in the more immediate space of all the tangles of those years, which had been very, very difficult. There was a great deal, firstly, that I didn't want to talk about, and if I had, I could have talked forever, you know. So it just set something free.
Yeah, yeah. So without having to tell the story of your loss and your bereavement and all of that, you were able to be with it, and it set something free
It
for
set
the
something.
first time.
It set something free, and then we had the workshop, and then I had these first 2 one-to-one sessions, one with Mary McGuire and one with Jean. I went back in the summer and saw both of them some more, and did a week long. But and Mary, every session I had with Mary got to a place where she said, now you can just sit quietly without that, and you know I'm here. And there was a way that she said, you know I'm here. There was something very substantial about Mary McGuire. She had a presence and a being. You felt her there was not just somebody sitting in a chair. It was a real being with you in the silence, and which always brought a big emotional something for me. It would always free some sort of cathartic release and a big shift. Where being with Jean Chandlin was very different, very different. It would have been a complete waste of time for me to spend my time with Jean crying. There was far too much to do. And Jean, I think at that time in 1988, 9, 90, 91, was at the very peak of his virtuoso phase. He had so many techniques. He had so many methods. He was so clever. Later, he got much, much simpler towards the end of his life. But at this point, he was just rich with things he knew how to do, and very adroit.
Mm. And what was it like to sit with him one-to-one, to be listened to by him?
It was lovely. I had a session with him in the group at that first weekend, and then one on my own after the Saturday. But in the group, I dreamt that I had had a dream, and in the dream I was in that group, and I was sitting on the floor. He said immediately, "So this is like the ground," and I said, "No, it was the first floor." And he said, "So I'm wrong already," and everybody laughed because, of course, they did. And then we worked with this sense of being on the floor, but it wasn't really the ground. Something about not really being grounded, but being somehow up and not down. I can't remember it quite clearly now. But then when I saw him in the evening, I had had this dream in which it's still, see, that's 36 years, and it touches me when I go back to it.
Still something touches you there, yeah.
It was my tombstone, my gravestone in the dream, and it was blank. And we explored the blankness for some time, and then we talked about other things. And then just as he was saying, we'll need to stop in a few minutes. Oh, and by the way, he said, what was on that tombstone? Just dropping it very casually. And I never saw what was there. But when he said that, there came into my mind the great melody from the end of Verdi's Aida, the opera set in Egypt, where the hero and the heroine have been buried alive as a punishment for being in love with each other. And the princess who's caused this to happen is lying on top of the tomb saying, "I wish I hadn't done this. This was such a stupid thing to do. I was jealous and got caught up in badness." I still couldn't really say, I couldn't unpack what that means now or meant then. But it absolutely brought a shift. It moved something.
So all these years later, remembering back to that experience, really,
it really touches something.
So what is it about all of that now?
It was a homecoming, for sure. The focusing world has been exceedingly forgiving of me. I've really been quite difficult.
Really?
Oh, argumentative and impossible and edgy. And one of our oldest people in the focusing world said to me one day, she said, "You're the person who's always saying, 'I'm leaving,' and everybody says, 'Please don't go.'" And then she said, "And I'm the person who everybody, I so much want to belong, and everybody always wishes I would leave." And it just broke my heart when she said that. I knew exactly what she meant. And later, Gene Gendlin said, in every group, there's somebody who gets the role of being the difficult person. And he said, you must never get rid of that person, because if you do, you will have all the trouble of appointing somebody else to do that. And I thought that was a very shrewd observation. So I've had far more than my share of tolerance in the focusing world. I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, so it's so lovely to hear you talk about going to Chicago and being with Bibi and Mary and focusing with them and with Jean, and the power of it that stays with you even all these years later. And I've been reading your book, and towards the end of your book, you wrote about your life motto, and you said, all my life I've sought to empower children.
Mm-hmm.
And something about that really touched me when I hear you talking now about your childhood and yourself.
The kids have been very important to me. It was a great shock to me when I started teaching at just 21 to find that kids like to be around me. But also, kids tend to feel free around me. I just got a nice illustration. I was at a summer school, and the nice ladies had got all the children to be, because it was a music summer school, and there were times when there was no class for one group of kids or another, so they had to be given something to do as they were waiting. And the nice ladies had got all these children organized to be just kind of sit quietly and do useful things. And I went in and I thought, this is so unfair to them. They'd been working hard doing their music, and they could really do to chill. And I had a slight feeling of mischief, but I looked around this room, which had maybe 30 kids in it. And all I did, I thought one of the boys looked as if he had mischief in him. So I sat down on the floor nearby, and that was all I did. And within 2 minutes, the whole room was pandemonium. And the kids just looked around, and the wee guy took a look and thought, there's fun here, and came and climbed all over me. And within 2 minutes, they were all, and the ladies were very cross with me, but I felt very unrepentant. It seemed actually the kids were full of energy and movement, and the last thing they needed to do was sit and be good little people. And I find I have 3 girls who come together these days for piano, 2 who are twins, and they're Ukrainian refugee girl who's been living with them. And they're all of an age, and they are the nicest girls. And they come and make themselves at home in my house for an hour or 2. And it's so nice to be around. They're thoughtful and they're kind, and they make me pictures of which. Let's find a representative picture. Can you see that from there?
If there is no piano in heaven, then I'm not going.
And I can't find my favorite picture. Oh, that's the best, but I can't see myself at the moment on the screen. Can you see that?
Lift it up a little bit, Rob. To Rob, thank you for teaching me piano, and also you are a great person. Love from Matilda.
Well, with reinforcement like that, even I get a sense of belonging in the world.
Yes. Isn't that just wonderful, the love?
I mean, so cute and so nice, and you're.
Yeah. So I know that music is such a huge part of your life, and when I was reading your book, I was really struck by listening, how in everything you do, listening is there, this meditative listening that you describe.
I'm much more an oral person than a visual person. But yeah, I think human beings need to be heard. We need our words to be heard, and our songs to be heard, and the sound of our voices to be heard. And I have some natural ability for feeling where people are at. It took me a long time to realize just how, when you see, one of the things about teaching the piano particularly is you can see people every week for a very, very long time. Much, much longer than most therapists would usually experience. It's quite normal for me to see some child 400 times. Well, that's a long time, and if it's 4 children in one family, that becomes 1,600 times, which is an enormously long time. And some of these young people get an uncanny understanding of you. They can read you, and are very accepting of who you are rather than who you think you ought to be.
Yeah.
Every now and then I'm sitting next to the piano saying something, and some child will say, I didn't do something wrong. And I'll say, I didn't say anything. And they'll say, no, but you thought it. And they have never been wrong.
Wow.
People get tuned into things that are so fine that I have no idea how I've communicated something. But there's a non-verbal flow of emotional understanding that can develop with people that is very mysterious, I think. And I'm sure some of it reduces to sort of small body signs that people pick up. But some of it seems, I don't think you can reduce it too much, I don't think it's like you could turn it into skills that people can learn. It's something very slippery.
And when you're spending so long, as you say, so many hours with those children side by side at the piano, that connection sounds like a very special connection and acceptance, and does develop. It's there.
Yeah, and I mean, just what happens in the musical space can be very intimate, but also people share the most amazing things. I think I had a teenage boy telling me how it feels when all the other boys in your friend group get girlfriends and none of them is available. That's a place that feels very raw to me.
Yeah, something very special about that.
And I think human beings need somebody in their lives that they can say those things to. And anything we can do to create a society in which people can say the things that are raw or embarrassing or difficult or even comfortably joyful.
Yeah. So you've been making a space for that, or creating a space for that.
Yeah. Hey, Rob, I got an A1 in all my exams. What do I say to my friend who's failed everything? Well, indeed, what do you say to your friend who's failed everything?
So what do you do? How do you respond in that situation? Is it like a focusing response?
Mostly, well, yes. I would very seldom, I would very seldom say, why don't you stop and sense into that? I mostly don't do that unless there's a special reason, like a focusing context but I might say, hey, hang on a minute, I need to get that for myself, and I would sense inwardly a little. which is an invitation, but without putting the invitation onto the other person. And I would always try to catch what the person is feeling. There's the level of the symbols that we use, the words and the gestures and the images and all that stuff. But there's the meaning underneath. What's this person getting at here?
That's what you're making space for.
Yeah, which is what we call the world of the felt sense.
With you. And where are you now with the focusing world, Rob? And what's alive in you now around focusing?
The year that my book came out, 2018, was a difficult year. My mother died at the beginning of the year, so she never saw the book, and my brother died later in the year. And then I didn't have them, particularly from some people. I didn't have as much response as I hoped for or something. Though, I mean, lots of people have been quite wonderful and generous and kind about the book, and I have nothing I could reasonably complain of. But and some of them have even understood it, which is always nice. So, but I had a collapse of confidence, and no sooner had the collapse of confidence than we had COVID, which impacted all our lives in complicated and strange ways. So there was a long period in my focusing life where the juice kind of fell out of it. And now, well, I'm delighted there's going to be a centenary conference in Vienna. I mostly don't think I can afford to do these things. I don't know who can afford to go to our focusing conferences, these international events with flights and expensive hotels, and it's a huge thing for many of us to do something like that. But I do hope the Vienna conference will be the biggest gathering of the clan that we may ever see, really. There's every chance of that.
When is that going to be?
That's going to be, I think it's in June 2026.
Wow.
Because Jean Jeanlin was born on Christmas Day in 1926. And so won't be exactly on the centenary because Vienna would be chilly in December. But also, I don't think many of us would turn out on Christmas Day. But it'll be near enough, you know?
Yeah, so that would be a lovely gathering.
It would be a lovely gathering. And so a lot of my focus in life now is, there are several people I've been helping with training, especially with coordinator training. And as I said right from the beginning, I did better with people who were experienced than with new people. And that's really still true. I've had some lovely experiences with coordinators developing in recent years, and people becoming focusing trainers or practitioners again. I think I'm often a good person there because people having trained in one of our traditions and with a feeling that that's the right thing, but also with a feeling that they're a little bit constrained somewhere. And as with the boy and the group of children, I'm better at freeing people up than I am at structuring them. So it's a situation that suits me.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, at the moment, I have a completely new person who's from a very kind of working class background, and has no experience of counseling or therapy or anything of this sort, whose life suddenly fell badly, came apart, and it's been lovely working with this person. And so I don't say that I can't be happy working with new people, but
Hmm.
it suits me quite well to
Hmm.
these sort of more advanced, so-called advanced levels of training, different kinds
Yeah.
of problems.
Yeah. And it's lovely to bring that freedom to people who have a lot of experience too. It sounds like
We
that's
all
such
get,
a gift.
yeah, that's right. It's lovely to bring that freedom, and we all get stuck in our ruts.
Yeah. And Rob, before we finish, I'd love to ask you just some more about Jean and what would you think he'd feel about what's happening with how focusing is developing now? What would he have to say about it?
I think there are several things to say there. One is nobody would want to say, least of all Catherine, that Catherine Torpy's work is perfect at the Institute. But I have been around other organizations, and one in particular, where the transition from a charismatic founder to the next phase of the organization has taken place. And it tends to be very traumatic and very difficult. And Catherine has held that space with amazing skill and serenity. You look at how well the Focusing Institute is doing at this point, and it's really Catherine and Elizabeth and the team, Rita and the others, have done a wonderful job of holding our worldwide community steady at what could have been. It wasn't. There was a difficult time, but it could have been a whole heap worse. And so that's one thing.
Mm.
The next thing is all kinds of nice things are happening around the world. The work that Melinda and Pat have done with Focusing Initiatives International has got to places that Focusing hasn't got to before. Parts of the world and communities that we haven't typically been able to reach. And to see the way in which Pat and Nina Joy Lawrence's work with resilience has helped people in Afghanistan, in Gaza, in West Africa. It's very moving to see that. It's a very important development. And a lot of that is in this space that was so important to Bibi, that you go to a community where people simply cannot talk about what's going on in their families, and where they've had deep trauma from political events. And this "you need not work without content" thing enables Focusing to go to places where people would otherwise have nothing of this kind to work with, or very little. And then there's another side to things, because I think that to some extent I wouldn't go so far as to say there's a Focusing cult, but you would know what I mean if I said it. As the years go on, the figure of Jean Jentin becomes more and more, he takes up more and more of the space as the great big, sort of figure. And I think there's a side of that Jean would like, because he did want recognition, and he did want people to say this is an amazing thinker and philosopher. But also there's a side that he really wouldn't like. This isn't about us being followers of Jean Gendlin. This is about us being followers of ourselves. And I think if Jean were here, he would be queasy about some of the ways in which he's being presented as the great leader or something. I don't think he would be happy. And I think he would do witty and skillful things that would disperse that kind of development. I don't know what to do there. I'm uncomfortable in that space.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's like in some areas he's been presented as a guru, or people like to have a guru, I suppose.
Well, we all like to have a guru. Of course we do. It's nice to have a guru. But it's not good, you know. It's maybe a phase one has to go through. It's maybe a phase that some of us have to go through, but it's really not good to get stuck there. Also, it's very damaging. I think that Jean thought his work in philosophy was relevant to everybody in all. And if what you've done becomes a movement, then it has a boundary around it, and the people outside of it think it's only for the insiders. So it cuts the world off from what Jean has done if it becomes the property of the focusing movement in a way that makes it like the scripture of a cult. It's like then it has nothing to do with anybody else. And actually, the way of seeing in the two areas, the way of seeing the importance of felt meaning in all our expressions of ourselves in philosophy seems to have a universal importance. It grows out of Anthony Ashley Cooper and Rousseau and Schopenhauer and all those people. But Jean Gay, certainly there are new things he said there that are important to anybody who's interested in what a symbol is, what an expression is. But also in the whole of counseling and psychotherapy and human relations at the psychology level. We don't want his stuff to belong to a movement. We want everybody to have it. And if you make it the property of a movement and he's the guru of the movement, then everybody doesn't get it and won't get it because it doesn't work. You know, it makes a boundary there.
Yeah, and it's good to be having the conversation around that, isn't it? And maybe the further we get from his death, the more that will change.
Yes, you don't want it to get entrenched, though. Like I'm very interested in the Jodo Shinshu Buddhism of Japan, and the great book Kyogyo Shinsho is the book after 800 years, more than 800 years, and it's completely the book of that group of people, and nobody else reads it because, of course, they don't. That's what you don't want. Once something settles into a closed movement pattern, it can stick for hundreds and hundreds of years. And we want focusing to be a space that's more open than that. You with Freud, with not I think by intention. I think Freud wanted to have followers, and he was very angry with people who didn't accept, the sexual theory and so on. But in fact, Freud had a genius for making people say, "Get lost, Dr. Freud. I'm going to do this my way." And his followers are nothing like him. They're diverse and argumentative and rebellious, and there's not a lot of common ground between Wilhelm Reich and Carl Jung and Alfred Adler. They all made their own paths. They didn't become, there is a disciple movement, but a lot of them broke free and did something different. And we're really short of people breaking free in our focusing world. There's far too much of a kind of submissiveness to the views of Dr. Gendlin that I think is bad for us.
Yeah, and that's what he encouraged, wasn't it? People to make focusing their own and do different things with it.
Something really paradoxical here, that Gene Chandlin and Carl Rogers say, make it your own and do your own thing, and finish up with disciples. And Sigmund Freud says, be my disciple, I will not stand for you rebelling. And people say, get lost. Various unprintable words and go and do their own thing. There's something paradoxical there. But I would like to see something fresher there.
That sounds like a lovely way to round off our conversation, Rob. That way, that desire to see something fresh.
Yeah. And it's lovely to talk to you. And this is very nice. And if you find everything I've said is rubbish, just throw it out. It's fine.
I don't think we'll be doing that. Before we finish, is there anything else, Rob,
I'd like to wave this around.
Your book? We'll
I
put
want
a
to
link
wave
to
my
it.
new book, Feeling Heard, Hearing Others.
Yeah, we'll put a link to it in the episode
I
notes.
think people need so much to be heard. But the other piece which we haven't said today, for many people, hearing somebody else is as healing as being heard. And this is not normally said. Bibi used to say to me, I'm often too tired, she would say. I'm often too tired to do focusing. I just can't go there just now. But I can always listen to somebody and it will always do me good. And it was really true. Bibi could be completely exhausted and she would sit down and listen to somebody and the life would come back into her. Listening to other people is deeply healing and it cures us of our, I suppose I have to say, narcissism. It cures us of our being obsessed with ourselves in a way that is very important and needs to be said more.
Yeah. So listening is life-giving. Yeah, for the listener to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
Thank you, Rob.
So
Thank
much.
you so much. It's been lovely. It's been lovely chatting. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for asking me, and we will keep in touch.
Absolutely, we will.